This morning, I am very excited because we are launching a new series on a very big subject. It's called The State of Spirituality with Lisa Ling. And not only is it a big subject, but this is a subject that we've been told never to bring up at parties, not to talk about over the dinner table. Religion is what I'm talking about this morning. The number of people who are in organized religions, that number is declining. And yet at the very same time, the vast majority of our fellow Americans, 7 in 10, describe themselves as spiritual. Over the next few weeks, Lisa's going to share stories from people of multiple faiths and backgrounds and religions as she explores the many different paths we take to spirituality. And today, she introduces us to a pair of scholars who say this is a really big deal and that without some form of spirituality, humanity, that is all of us on this globe, are heading toward a crisis.
The force of life is in every bit of nature.
The morning I met up with Lisa Miller, the author of The Awakened Brain, at her home in rural Connecticut, she seemed to awaken something in me before we even started our interview.
May I invite you into a practice?
I would love it. And now I'm also inviting you, watching at home, to close your eyes and join us.
I invite you to set before you a table. This is your table. You may invite anyone, living or deceased, who truly has your best interest in mind. Ask them if they love you. And now finally, you may invite your higher power and ask if they love you. And now with all of these people sitting here right now, what do they need to tell you now? When you're ready, I invite you back.
Lisa, you made me cry before we even started this interview.
When we walk through the door is the hand that invites.
As a professor of clinical psychology at Teachers College, Columbia University, Miller is one of our nation's top experts on spirituality.
What is the difference between religion and spirituality?
Religion are beautiful world faith traditions. It is a gift of our parents and grandparents. Spirituality is innate. MRI studies that say, oh, here are the circuits of spiritual awareness in every single human brain. No one's left out.
Spirituality is often described as the search for life's deeper meaning, a reality greater than oneself, and connection to a higher power. Miller says it can be found through religion, but also in nature, meditation, and prayer. And science proves it.
We now have an excellent peer-reviewed science of 20 years that says we are innately spiritual beings. And when we strengthen our spiritual core, we are healthier, we are more resilient.
Around 82% of Americans have some sort of spiritual belief system. But at the same time, many are moving away from organized religion.
We come to different gods in different ways.
Barun Soni has had a front row seat to our nation's changing spiritual habits.
Why do you think so many people, particularly young people, are moving away from religion?
Those who are moving away have been told a particular story about religion, which is true, which is that religion is a source of violence, casteism, misogyny, anti-LGBTQ rhetoric, terrorism, etc. They haven't been told another story about religion is also a place of social services and liberation theology and hospitals and schools. So as we sit here, we can just watch our thoughts and our emotions go by.
Soni is the University of Southern California's interfaith chaplain.
It's interesting, in the course of this conversation, we barely mentioned God.
So I tend not to talk about God in the work that I do. There doesn't have to be a supernatural component. I tell students you don't need religion and you don't need God, but you need something sacred.
Soni oversees more student religious groups than anyone in the country and sees what he calls a disturbing trend.
When I see 50% of students who have not been raised with an intergenerational religion, and I see rates of depression for young adults higher than we've ever seen, to me it's more than just correlation, it's causality.
Without the protective layer of faith, Soni says, young people have been turning to something else, social media.
Which has replaced religious identification in many ways, has led, I think, to an epidemic where 65% of college students are so anxious they have trouble functioning.
Do you think that a more strengthened spiritual core could actually stave off or help to stave off depression?
I absolutely think so.
Some may find that claim controversial.
When I pray, sometimes I pray and I first put my feet in the water.
But Miller, a clinical psychologist, agrees.
There's nothing more important you can do in adolescence or in college than seek the spiritual reality. And we know this through the lens of science.
That's a very bold statement, Dr. Miller, that there is nothing more important for an adolescent than their spiritual development.
If we ignore it, spiritual emergence can devolve into emptiness. What is the purpose? There's no purpose, an empty bucket, despair, depression.
For those who are hoping to just awaken their spiritual core, Miller recommends looking for moments of synchronicity.
What is synchronicity?
You might be thinking of someone and they show up. You might be seeking for an answer and it's presented in a book or by voice. Synchronicity lets us know that there's a deeper nature to life.
But skeptics may argue it's just coincidence. So to help me better understand, Miller asked to lead me in another guided practice where I thought about synchronicity in my own life. And when I opened my eyes...
Oh my God, what?
Wow. My producer tells me that a beautiful white bird just flew in next to me outside the window. Coincidence? Maybe. But for me, it didn't feel like it.
I don't think I've ever seen this bird in this area. It is quite unprobabilistic. It's a sacred synchronicity.
And I think we can only recognize the significance of it because we have awakened brains.
So Dr. Miller says that it was about 40 years ago when all talk of spirituality and religion was kind of eliminated from the public square in an attempt to be inclusive. And so you have an entire generation that has grown up without any sense of spirituality, yes, and that has helped to lead this generation into this crisis of depression.
But I so believe in this. I was very struck when she said it's the most important thing you can do for adolescents, spirituality, getting them to think about it.
Well, and MRI studies have proven that those with a sense of spirituality have thicker tissue in the brain than those who don't.
I love this series.
This morning, we're continuing our series. We call it The State of Spirituality with Lisa Ling, that explores different paths to faith, God, and religion. Today, we're going to take a look at a grassroots movement pushing to end a tradition that's dating back nearly 2,000 years in the Roman Catholic Church. 2,000 years.
Wow.
CBS News contributor Lisa Ling traveled to Albany, New York, to meet the women who are leading communities that are defying the church's leadership.
For hundreds of years, this has been the exclusive body at the helm of the Catholic Church. Men. But inside this warehouse-looking building in upstate New York, I am standing on the shoulders. Rebels are convening. And they want change.
Change begins by somebody doing it.
You are holy. This is the Upper Room, described as an inclusive Catholic community led by congregants and a woman priest, Reverend Mary Teresa Streck.
Continue to share the good news. People are looking for what we're offering, and they want to see ordained women celebrating Mass.
Mary Magdalene's...
At today's church service, the sermon is delivered by Bishop Bridget Mary Meehan.
And inspires us to create a renewed model of church.
Both women are part of the Association of Roman Catholic Women Priests, a worldwide movement to ordain Catholic women. Around 64% of U.S. Catholics support the idea of women priests.
Why the pushback from the institution, from the Vatican?
I think they're afraid of change.
The Roman Catholic Church does not allow women to be ordained, arguing in part that clergy should be unmarried men in the image of Jesus and his 12 disciples.
Your spirit moves through the love within us.
These women disagree and have formed a resistance.
There are other Christian denominations that allow women clergy. Why remain part of a faith where you are considered illegitimate?
Because it's in my bones. I am a Roman Catholic.
Like many organized religions in the 21st century, Catholic Church membership is declining, many citing the way the Church has dealt with sexual abuse claims involving priests and how it's historically handled divorce, the queer community, and women.
So did you leave the Catholic Church for a while?
I think the Catholic Church left me.
That is a sentiment echoed by most members of the upper room. For many here, 2010 marked a turning point with their Catholic faith, after the Vatican listed ordaining women as a grave offense, alongside pedophilia.
Would you say that these women priests brought you back to Catholicism?
Oh, most certainly they did. We are the Catholic Church here, too, so we're not apart from them.
The Catholic women priest movement began back in 2002, when 7 women were ordained on the Danube River in Germany. The Vatican excommunicated all known to be involved, and all those who have come after.
Our response was, we do not accept this excommunication. We're leading the church we love into a renewed model of priestly ministry to respond to the needs of Catholics all over the world.
Both Bridget Mary and Mary Teresa are former nuns, raised devout and proud Catholics.
By the time I was in 3rd grade, I wanted to be a nun. I knew in 3rd grade.
At just 17 years old, Mary Teresa says she was called to become a nun, until 18 years later, another call came.
I met a young priest.
Love.
I knew that I loved him dearly, and he loved me dearly. So we both resigned.
And your faith never wavered.
Oh, no, I think it was stronger than ever. We were actually married right within the public housing project, where we ministered for many years.
But after Jay died of cancer, Mary Teresa began to explore a new call, the Catholic priesthood.
Did you know you'd be excommunicated by becoming ordained?
When I first spoke with Bridget Mary, the very first call, the first thing that she said to me is, if you do this, you will be excommunicated. And I said, okay, well, that doesn't mean anything, really, because I will continue doing everything that I'm doing.
In 2013, hundreds were in attendance as Bridget Mary ordained Mary Teresa in Albany, a first in the area.
Since 2013, we have 10 women who have been ordained. I think people are saying, I'm not going to wait for the church to decide it's okay.
Around 300 women worldwide have now been ordained within the larger movement. Mary Teresa and Bridget Mary, who both have doctorate degrees in ministry, created a process and seminary curriculum for ordination in the U.S.
Do you think that you will live to see women priests accepted in the Roman Catholic Church?
Probably not, but that's not a good reason not to do it.
Earlier this year, in a rare interview, the Pope addressed the issue of women clergy with CBS News' Nora O'Donnell.
For a little girl growing up Catholic today, will she ever have the opportunity to be a deacon and participate as a clergy member in the church?
No.
Take and eat. This is my very self.
But these women say that won't stop them. They hope they're laying the groundwork for future generations of women priests.
If you had an opportunity to have an audience with the Pope and those in the Vatican, what would you say to them?
Do not be afraid of us. We have a lot to offer.
We spent our whole lives just creating a church where there's more justice, more equality, and that everyone is so welcome at the table of God's love.
Sounds very Jesus-like.
We reached out to the Albany Diocese for comment, and it responded that it is not associated with this group. The Vatican also did not respond. Next month, Mary Teresa and Bridget Mary are headed to Rome during the Vatican's gathering of bishops. And in defiance of the church, the women will ordain 6 more people then, including a transgender priest. They've also reached out to the Vatican in hopes of meeting with Pope Francis, but have not received a reply. Tony?
Lisa, part of what inspired your series is the fact that younger people are not joining organized religions of any kind. And so you might think, well, the Catholic Church should modernize, welcome women into the fold, make them priests. But is it just that they're afraid they'll lose the older contingent who's been going to church this whole time?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the people have been leaving the Catholic Church in droves, and these women say that it's time that the Catholic Church wakes up because they believe that God is an inclusive God, and that is the ministry that they are preaching.
It was so interesting to see your visuals, Lisa, when you said rebels are convening on the top floor, and then you see this group of women who are clearly determined, and then to hear that this is 2,000 years that they're fighting against. A rule that just because somebody said so, that's what strikes me about it. Somebody just made the rule and said, no women allowed.
Yeah, and somebody's not God. It wasn't like from on high. It's
somebody is our men.
Yeah.
Our men.
We're basically talking about men.
Yeah.
So do you see this changing?
Well, I asked the women that question. Do you think that you will ever see women become clergy in the Roman Catholic Church? And they don't believe that in their lifetime they will.
Yeah, and in an industry, journalism, where you don't often get clear answers, Nora O'Donnell asked the Pope, will we have female priests? No, he said. One word. Lisa, thank you very much.
That's right.
Another eye-opening report. Appreciate it. Do you have to have faith? Our series, The State of Spirituality, asks the question. State of Spirituality with Lisa Ling. There she is. There's Lisa. We've been taking looks at different paths to faith and fellowship here in these United States. And this morning, we bring you a story about an often overlooked but key part of this conversation. Non-believers. Lisa Ling visits a group hoping to offer a sense of community that's often found in churches and mosques and temples, but for people who don't want to get God involved.
You can count on me.
At first impression,
1, 2, 3.
this may look like a typical contemporary Sunday morning church service.
The difference is the one I'm attending has music, it has a message, it has fellowship. It just doesn't have God.
You'll be there.
This is a non-religious gathering in Los Angeles called Sunday Assembly.
What does Sunday Assembly mean to you?
It means community.
Sunday Assembly is family for me.
I would always have conversations with other friends who are atheists, is we never had community. And when I discovered Sunday Assembly, I found that community.
Ryan Trout, Amy Boyle, and Sam Renderos are all leaders within Sunday Assembly's LA chapter. Most here are not affiliated with an organized religion, and they're not alone. Nearly 30% of U.S. adults are now religiously unaffiliated, often defining themselves as atheist, no belief in God, or agnostic, unsure if there's a God.
I reject most supernatural, if not all supernatural ideas. I have need for community and human connection, the stuff that to me matters most.
Renderos says that connection is being formed here at Sunday Assembly. It may be an unconventional gathering, but it employs a very conventional structure.
Having this curiosity and asking your own questions.
We have a TED Talk style talk. We do sing-alongs, tell a personal story. This might be sounding familiar because it has a lot of the same components that a church might, but we don't do religion.
Founded in 2013 by two comedians in the UK, Sunday Assembly was created for those seeking a secular community. It now has around 60 chapters all over the world, including in other U.S. cities like Atlanta, Chapel Hill, and Nashville.
We release a lot of endorphins singing together. It helps unite people. Like the ingredients of a church service are powerful.
Speaking of interesting topics, it's time for our speaker to come and join the stage.
But the members acknowledge their church-like structure may not be for everyone, especially since 1 in 3 U.S. adults report suffering from some sort of religious trauma.
Are there some people for whom that kind of structure might be a turnoff and actually
Absolutely.
triggering?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Religion has harmed a lot of people.
We have people that find it triggering, the actual assembly that happens once a month, but still comes to our game nights and comes to our book clubs, comes to our volunteer events, and they're no less a member of the community than the people that come every month to the Sunday Assembly.
And what's wonderful about this is nobody's going to anywhere back if they don't come. So there's no hard sell.
Despite most members being atheists, all are welcome here. Yes, even those with faith, which includes Trout.
So Ryan, you are not atheist, you are more agnostic.
I like to say I'm an agnostic Episcopalian.
Raised Baptist in Kentucky, Trout left the religion. He says because of its exclusion of women and the queer community.
I like the organized part of it. I know a lot of people run from organized religion, but the organized part of it was such a sell point for me.
He began identifying as agnostic, but at the same time was also called to the ancient rituals found in the Episcopal Church. Now he's trying to bring similar rituals to Sunday Assembly.
We're working on a book of secular traditions and rituals that we can pass on to people because I think it's important, it's historic, you feel part of something bigger than yourself.
What does my life mean? What matters to me? Why does it matter to me? Those are questions we all ask, whether we're religious or not. Those are spiritual questions.
I first learned about Sunday Assembly from Varun Soni, the Dean of Religious Life at the University of Southern California. He says spirituality helps give people meaning, but that meaning can also be found in secular spaces.
So for those who claim to be atheists, but take part in rituals, collective rituals, how would you explain that?
Atheists and humanists in the United States are the most religiously literate people, actually, if you look at all the data. They've done their research, and just because you don't believe in God doesn't mean you don't believe in something. And so the atheists, humanists, agnostics I know, many of them have deeply spiritual lives. And in fact, they're animated by the idea that as humans, we can do great work in the world.
That very idea is part of the Sunday Assembly motto.
Live better, help often, and wonder more.
And they say they don't need religion to tell them to do or be good.
When it comes down to where does morality come from, it comes from this. It comes from ourselves and our connections to each other.
Well, come on. Baby, don't you wanna go?
For those here, it's not about heaven or hell. It's about being part of a community that supports one another, not in the afterlife, but in this one.
This is the one life we have, so we should celebrate it with one another, you know, for all the time that we get.
Good job.
And next month, Sunday Assembly will hold its international conference, and for the first time, it will be here in Los Angeles. And we want you to know that this series is ongoing, and we're working on stories that explore unique paths to Islam, Judaism, and a number of other faiths. Nate?
Lisa, we love this series, but I do have a question, though. I know in the church that I was raised in, they take offerings and donations. How does the Sunday Assembly keep the lights on? How do they stay afloat?
Well, the Sunday Assembly in Los Angeles, they pass a donation bag around during their services as well, and that's the way they support themselves.
Lisa, I love this series. It's really fantastic. Thank you very much. It feels a little bit, I mean, I get it and I don't get it. It's almost like decaf coffee to me. Right? Like, you're taking the God out of all of the religious practices, the singing, the gathering, the offerings. It seems like you're going 9/10 of the way.
Vegan meat replacement.
But the last tenth is a big tenth, you know? And if you want the community, I understand this. You want the community. These days, with all the distractions and how busy everyone is, we're losing that. But maybe you're not sure how you feel about faith.
That's a good point, Adrian. I think every human craves community.
Yeah.
And we find it in any way we can.
Yeah, it's true. You run a church without God on Sunday, don't you? It's called the NFL.
Yeah. Lisa, thank you so much.
We're back this morning with a new installment of our series, The State of Spirituality with Lisa Ling, which highlights Americans on unique journeys of faith. Many traditional religions are trying to make progress toward being more inclusive of the LGBTQ plus community, but for some groups, it's been a very slow journey on that front. Today, Lisa introduces us to a pastor in California who wouldn't be welcome to preach in many American churches.
Each player spins a spinner.
Drew Stever says his life is pretty average.
We play board games and we garden and we make art and we have to remind our kids 12 times to pick up the socks in their bedroom.
What? He and his partner Hazel live in Southern California with their 3 kids and 2 dogs.
Hazel always tells me, like, I'm her boring white guy.
But you haven't always been a boring white guy.
No, I haven't always been. Jesus is asking the people around him, where do you stand?
Stever is a transgender man, and he's also an ordained minister in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America.
Do we stand on the side of fear and hate? Or do we stand on the side of curiosity and awe?
Some Christian denominations have evolved to be more inclusive of the LGBTQ plus community, but the acceptance of trans clergy has been much slower. According to Pew Research, the majority of Christians still feel whether a person is a man or a woman is determined by their sex assigned at birth.
Do you believe that the Lutheran Church is a safe place for queer people?
It is trying so hard.
In 2015, the Lutheran Church ordained its first trans priest. Trans clergy also serve in other denominations, but most still forbid LGBTQ plus clergy.
Because there are a lot of people who say that, according to the Bible, God made man and woman, and that couldn't be more clearly defined. How do you respond to them?
It's hard to relate it to modern day times because it wasn't written for 2024, it was written for then. When we read in the scripture that God created man and woman, yes, and God created everyone else as well.
Pastor Drew is a good pastor, and I think he focuses on Jesus' commands that we should love God and love our neighbor as ourselves.
At Stever's home church, Hope Lutheran in Hollywood, congregants told us when he says all are welcome, he really means it.
Pastor Drew just brings such a light and life and just encapsulates everything we've always believed in learning to really spread a message that is just love.
Born and raised Lutheran in Minnesota's Twin Cities, growing up, Stever also went to Catholic school, attending church several days a week.
Was there a certain point in your upbringing where you just didn't feel right in your body?
I grew up female and in the female context, and I just never felt like that worked for me.
Throughout his childhood, Stever says he felt a lot of anger due to his gender dysphoria.
There were definitely times where, if I can't exist in one way, I don't want to exist at all. I would just be better off not alive.
Stever credits a homeroom teacher for first introducing him to a more compassionate Christian theology, accepting of everyone. This eventually helped him realize he was being called to become a pastor.
You went into seminary as a woman. How did you come out of seminary?
Not a woman.
It was summer 2016, and leading up to the election, anti-trans rhetoric was ramping up. But Stever says he could no longer deny who he's always been.
And there was a moment where I woke up in the morning and the words that came to my mind was, you don't have to be angry anymore. It almost felt like God just took a snowball and just threw it at my face. And
so you think that voice was God?
I think so, yeah.
But after Stever transitioned, he began receiving hate, mostly online.
Do you have concerns about going public in this way?
I mean, yeah, I have concerns. My family's safety is probably my top priority. And I believe that for those who need to hear will hear.
Folks want to just cookie cutter everything.
Stever's spouse, Hazel, who is also a Lutheran pastor, knows firsthand the discrimination many can face in church.
There's a lot of people in the Christian faith who don't even believe women can be pastors.
And you two are kind of a double whammy.
I know.
I know. We don't mean to be. We're actually really quite boring.
Yeah. And Stever plans to keep being boring. But along the way, he also hopes that just by being himself, he can help more people feel seen and safe in church.
What do you say to those who may have felt burned by church and by religion?
My first response is, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that the church missed you. I would say specifically to folks of color, to people living with disabilities, people who are LGBTQ. You are good. Nothing is wrong with you. You are so good. And you don't need the church to tell you that.
Pastor Drew has had a pride flag hanging outside of Hope Lutheran, and shortly after we filmed there, someone ripped down the flag and damaged it. The flag, though, is back up, and he told us he is, quote, not deterred by one person's small worldview.
I think that's the way to look at it. I mean, one person did that, and the community, though, says otherwise. It's interesting that the stories about being seen. I think you allow people to be seen in such a particular way because when you sit in front of them, you're seeing them. You have such presence in these stories, and it really comes across.
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this series. We think it's fantastic.
I do too.
Amazing.
I love the comment, those who need to hear will hear.
Yeah, and you are good, which is
Yes.
the message that the church should be preaching to
Yes.
congregants.
Love your neighbor.